So the narcissistic shared fantasy, this is where it gets really screwed up, is, okay, I'm imposing it on you and it's abusive and you hate it. Of course you do. You're a human being.
Yes.
You reach unconsciously for a defense and you use the fantasy I've given you to defend yourself against me.
Because I'm in that map.
Yes.
So I start fighting the monsters within a map.
Yes.
An illusion that's been created by you.
Yes.
And I stay there. And if anything, I go deeper into it.
Correct.
Because I then add to the story.
Yes, you do. This
shit.
Therapeutically, it's very, very difficult to unravel.
Well, let's try to unravel it. We're listening to a conversation between Richard Grannon and Mohammed Kader, two individuals who specialize in coaching others through narcissistic abuse recovery. Richard Grannon says that people who try to defend themselves against narcissists often succumb to the fantasy, even in their attempts at a defense. This was Mohammed Kader's response.
Within a map.
Yes.
An illusion that's been created by you.
Yes.
And I stay there, and if anything, I go deeper into it.
Now, who are the monsters in a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath's fantasy that intended targets often end up fighting? Here's the hint. That's right, flying monkeys. But it is an illusion, Mohammed Kader says. Flying monkeys are not monsters. If you are an intended target who is watching this video, please understand that flying monkeys are manufactured by derpers. Yes, they have been put into a triggered state where they are highly reactive to you, the state of derp. But the idea that they are monsters is an illusion. The problem with fighting this particular illusion is that it advances the false narrative. The emotionally overpowering nature of those false narratives knocks them off balance, but by and large, flying monkeys are innocent and righteous. As you embrace stoicism and go from reacting to responses, you realize you don't need to fight flying monkeys.
Fighting the monsters within a map.
Yes.
An illusion that's been created by you.
Yes.
And I stay there, and if anything, I go deeper into it.
When you fight the flying monkeys, you complete the triangulation. The false narrative generated by derpers who use projection and reaction formation portrays you as a monster. So flying monkeys lash out at you because the story is that you are a monster. And when you respond out of character with reactive abuse, that false narrative grows. Derpers use mobs. You can deal with one person harassing you. What about 10? What about 50? If you snap when the 36th person tries harassing you, you validate the false narrative. They've been describing you as a monster. Now they have proof. These are Darvo tactics employed unconsciously by innocent and righteous flying monkeys who are too busy immersing themselves in the false narrative fantasy to understand what's happening in reality. And this needs to be said. Anybody who uses antisocial behaviors to get what they want is a perpetrator, not a victim. But the good news is that choosing not to fight flying monkeys is ironically a little like what happens in karate movies. Even if the mobs generated are 1,000 to 1, or 100,000 to 1, or even 1,000,000 to 1, intended targets never have to snap. We can choose to respond instead of react. That is a stoic skill, and as we practice doing that, using that skill becomes effortless. Stoic non-reactiveness allows us to leave the fantasy map and enjoy reality without ever advancing the false narrative. That narrative will now have to be advanced through cope or literal psychosis, but those two things are enough to sustain a fantasy-based false narrative. More on that in a later video. Unfortunately, we first have to get to a different phenomenon. Enablers of narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths who often surface both within workplace situations and family systems. Here's Dr. Ramani Dervisala, a licensed clinical psychologist, and what she says about what happens if an employee complains about a toxic workplace.
But with the human resource recommendation of counseling for the employee who brings the complaint about a toxic workplace, and then the person takes the therapy sessions to address how they're feeling, they're likely having multiple mental health issues like we would see in somebody experiencing narcissistic abuse, including anxiety, sadness, confusion, helplessness, problems with concentration, rumination, and all of that can mean that if the employee pursues legal action and those therapy records get subpoenaed, they will show an employee with mental health issues. And then the person who brought the complaint may be pinged as the issue. This right here is the story of every narcissistic abuse survivor in the world. By the time the story is told and the survivor has been through it, the story gets shifted to the survivor being the one with the problem and the narcissistic person blithely getting to move into the future and harm more people, I guess, who will end up getting recommended to get more counseling. So this really begs the question of why are employers so afraid of managing toxic cultures? Why? Because management, C-suite, senior administration, and human resource folks do often tend to be enablers and company people. One could argue that they've benefited from the structure of the company and don't want to kill the golden goose. And in this way, all of these structures are like the enablers in a toxic and narcissistic family. Instead of being willing to see the narcissistic family members or the family dynamic clearly, they would rather pathologize and gaslight and scapegoat the people who are the survivors of the abuse or getting the worst of the abuse in that system. In this way, in the workplace, the leaders in that industry can benefit financially and professionally and live in a state of denial. And the people being abused are in essence left to fend for themselves. Basically, the leadership in toxic workplace cultures and the policies that that leadership puts forward often have no teeth because they choose not to understand narcissism.
So, if an employee complains about a toxic workplace, HR recommends therapy to that employee, and if that employee has experienced narcissistic abuse, it may be discovered that the employee is experiencing confusion, has trouble concentrating, is ruminating, is depressed, etc., etc. So, employers, after these therapy sessions, may be able to pin the problem on the employee who complained. Employers may not address the abuse or the abusers for, among other considerations, financial reasons. But when these enablers step in to feed the false narrative, after something like that has happened, it's up to intended targets to draw strong boundaries in response. Enablers, by the way, may start blah-blahing about the importance of boundaries, even as they step all over yours. For instance, healthy people have strong boundaries against antisocial behaviors, like gaslighting, passive aggression, and mobbing. Behavior that disregards the rights of others. No amount of fantasy changes whether giving into those behaviors is healthy for a person. Enablers may deny being enablers. I'm not an enabler, they may say. For example, I'm doing this because I'm a good person. I didn't have a federally required legal duty to provide all employees with a non-hostile workplace, which I failed to do for 3 years in a row. No, it turns out that I'm a big hero, and I am getting involved in this fantasy narrative out of altruism, not selfishness. Or if they're family members, I'm not an enabler, they may say. For example, I didn't enable antisocial behavior, which is known to disregard the rights of others, for more than 20 years. But passive aggression usually gets me exactly what I want. I got that loaf of bread. I got that Lambo. I got that 18-acre mansion. Luke 12, verse 3 says, "What you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the daylight, and what you have whispered in the inner rooms will be proclaimed from the housetops." Thank you so much for joining me on this video. Much love, and God bless.